former mayor of Montego Bay, Mr. Lloyd B. Smith, the governor, who will be our moderator, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. As the mayor of Montego Bay, it is my honor to officially welcome you to this Sam Sharpe lecture for 2022. I'm really very happy to know that after a 2-year break, events associated with the celebration of the national hero, the Right Excellent Sam Sharpe, are back. Congratulations are in order for Minister Homer Davis and his Flames of Freedom team for their interest and dedication to this cause.
Could it be your card?
Sam Sharpe is regarded as Jamaica's foremost freedom fighter, and his efforts to win our freedom resulted in him paying the ultimate price. Today, I use this occasion to call for the proposed renaming of the Springfield Primary School as Sam Sharpe Primary School to be speeded up and become a reality in a very short order. Ladies and gentlemen, if we look at Sam Sharpe and the role he played in the abolition of slavery, I am sure you will agree that more needs to be done to honor him in this parish. Sam Sharpe Square was so named because this is where he was hanged. Sam Sharpe Teachers College was also named after Daddy Sharpe. However, there's a lot more that can be done to honor this great man on whose shoulders we all stand today. I must also extend thanks and congratulations to the Minister of Education for the bold move to reintroduce civics as a subject to the school curriculum. This is a masterstroke and one that will help to educate and re-educate our students on matters relating to people like Samuel Sharpe. The teaching of civics will also help to bring back civic pride in our nation and will play a role in the rebuilding of good family values. So as we anxiously await the information contained in the presentations from our 2 lecturers, I again welcome you all to my city, which today remains the fastest developing city in the English-speaking Caribbean. Let us all listen with an open mind to today's presentations. And on Wednesday, December 28th, let us support the Flames of Freedom Torch Run and the evening of celebrations in Tullow Castle in honor of a national hero, the Right Excellent Sam Sharpe, who said, "I would rather die on yonder gallows than live in slavery." Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Thank you very much, sir. And as Mayor mentioned, the man behind this mission to re-engage members of the public with Daddy Sharpe and his work, the Honorable Homer Davis, Member of Parliament, St. James Southern, he will now come forward and bring his greetings. Kindly make Minister Davis welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Tingling. His Worship the Mayor, Councillor Leroy Williams, Bishop, the Honorable Conrad Pitkin, Custos Rotularium of St. James, Mr. Shalman Scott, former mayor, now an historian, par excellence. A man who has a wealth of knowledge. And sometimes we do communicate, because I am one such person who don't think I know everything. So sometimes you have to rely on those who were there before you. Lloyd B. Smith, the governor, man of all seasons.
Why it keeps jumping? Because when I was doing it originally, it wasn't.
The real big man in Montego Bay.
Connect this to it.
When he speaks, when he writes,
And then I jumped.
everyone listens and everyone reads.
Somebody was jumping.
Councillor Coke from the Maroon Town Division.
I was jumping.
Dr. Prendergast from the University of the West Indies.
I guess
West.
it probably was your cable. But I first never said that.
Students, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a very good evening for us who are here today, who are enjoying the freedom that Samuel Sharpe has fought for. And I would just like for us to just reflect what it was leading up to the 27th of December in that year, today being the 22nd, and you know that in 5 days' time you will be hung by the neck. It sends a chill down my own body that 5 days Samuel Sharpe would be what? Personally for me, and possible for others, I have always said Samuel Sharpe, which as my man. And so when I became the mayor of Montego Bay, and Mr. Sid Bartley came and spoke with me, when certain decision was to be taken about having a day, Sam Sharpe Day for St. James. And hadn't it been for COVID, I think we would have had a Sam Sharpe lecture, because it's something that I'm very passionate about. Very, very passionate about it. Because I don't think most of us, and I'm so anxious to hear what Mr. Scott will be saying this evening. Because I don't think we who are here now, who are enjoying the freedom, as I said to someone earlier, can you imagine if at the time the system that there were then had turned back a Sam Sharpe? We don't know where we would be today. Because Sam Sharpe movements does not only affect Jamaica, but the Caribbean, the Latin America, and South American countries. So this is why I've always seen the work of Sam Sharpe as one that we should commemorate in a very, very special way, because he has done so much for us to be here today, to be enjoying the freedom we are now enjoying. But it was the internationally acclaimed author Phil Valentine once said, "You don't right the wrongs of the past by wronging the people of the present." Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you to this Sam Sharpe lecture, which I know will be stimulating, engaging, and informative as we salute national hero, the Right Excellent Sam Sharpe, Daddy Sharpe. This event forms part of Sam Sharpe Day 2022, which will be officially observed on Tuesday, December the 27th, and will be celebrated on Wednesday, December 28th. Sam Sharpe Day was officially proclaimed by Governor General, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, in December 2020 at the request of the Cabinet and in keeping with the policy of the government to promote the knowledge and memory of those who have contributed to the development of Jamaica. Right Excellent Samuel Sharpe stands tall among the world's greatest freedom fighters who have paved the way for us to be living in a free world today. As Member of Parliament for St. James Southern and Chairman of the Flames of Freedom Committee, I am delighted that after 2 years break because of COVID-19, we are able to bring back the Sam Sharpe Day Flames of Freedom event. This lecture is a precursor to the big day when we will have the Flames of Freedom torch run from Catadupa through Cambridge into Mount Pelion, into Anchovy, down to Sam Sharpe Square, with a return leg taking the runners through Granville into Johns Hall and culminating at Tullow Castle. We are extremely happy to welcome Mr. Shalman Scott, who will be presenting here today. I must thank the moderator, Mr. Lloyd B. Smith, who journeyed from Kingston to be here with us this evening, because he puts a very high value on the work of Samuel Sharpe. I must say that this lecture and the events associated with Sam Sharpe Day 2022 are additional giant step for the parish of St. James and Jamaica as a whole, as we seek to right the wrong which were done to our ancestors. Let me extend an invitation, which I think it was said by the mayor, but I want to reinforce it, to join us on Wednesday, December the 28th at 6 p.m. in Tullow Castle, where we will celebrate Sam Sharpe Day with a family-oriented event featuring performance from a number of local gospel groups, closing with the legendary Leroy Sibley's. Looking ahead to Sam Sharpe 2023, and Brother Sid, this is a new part. Today we launch the Sam Sharpe poster and essay primary and high school competition. These events will allow our students in primary and high school, as well as those at Sam Sharpe Teachers College, to pour their creative juices in masterpieces of literature and art depicting Sam Sharpe, the Baptist deacon, and Sam Sharpe, the revolutionary. Today, as Member of Parliament, I proudly launch the Sam Sharpe primary and high school essay and poster competition, and urge students to get creative and enter this competition. Entry forms are available. The deadline for the forms entries to be delivered is February the 28th, 2023. And the respective winners will be announced and awarded on May the 23rd, 2023, during the Tribute to Sam Sharpe event in Sam Sharpe Square at 8 a.m. It is also my intention, and we are well advanced, come next year to launch the Sam Sharpe Tertiary Scholarship, which is aimed at engaging students from St. James Southern who are matriculated to tertiary level institution. I want to thank our gracious sponsors for their support at this year's Sam Sharpe's Flames of Freedom Lecture and Sam Sharpe Day celebration. The Western Mirror, Lanes Plus Wholesale, Chase Fund, Caribbean Producers Jamaica, Montego Bay Airport. And last but not least, the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sports. Your generous support has ensured that these events can be staged and will be very successful. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I invite you to sit back. I'm not sure you can relax, but sit back and learn some of the things that we have never or were never taught about Samuel Sharpe. It's a pleasure to have you here this evening. It really, as I said previously, it's a passion that I have, because I think that our history sometimes is not taught enough. And the mayor has mentioned about the Ministry of Education introducing or reintroducing civics in school, which is very important. But I think that our history needs to be taught more. We need to know how we got here. We need to know where we were before we got here. And as a people, I think sometimes we are taken over by culture which we are not very familiar with. And as a result of that, we tend to lose our journey sometimes and lose our way. But all is not lost. I have hope. When I look at the young people who are here, I am very hopeful that one day we will get to that stage where we can all be proud of all our people and not only some of our people. Once again, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Minister Davis. The passion that you have for this could not be hidden, and we are really hoping that this year Sam Sharpe Day celebration will be the catalyst for next year and beyond, because students, you already have something looking forward to, the essay and poster competition. So we ask you to spread the word and ensure that the entries come in, as they say, bank to bank, right? Okay, this gentleman who is going to be speaking now is representing our Honorable Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sports, the Honorable Babsy Grange, who unfortunately could not make it here this evening. So please give a round of applause to Mr. Sid Bartley, who is a cultural expert and consultant.
Thank you, Mr. Tingling. Honorable Custos, the Minister, Honorable Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister and MP for South St. James, former mayor, well known to this activity. And I love the new things you're bringing in, loving it. Your Worship, the Mayor and Governor, good to see you again. And I also greet the students who are here. I hear from Cornwall College, and it's Bickersteth Primary, and all the others who are here for this lecture. Minister Grange wishes to convey her regards, and I will just read her statement. I am pleased to participate in the Sam Sharpe lecture being staged at the Montego Bay Civic Center by the Renewed Flames of Freedom Planning Committee under the leadership of Honorable Homer Davis, Member of Parliament for South St. James and Minister of State in the Office of the Prime Minister. As the first Flames of Freedom activity since Sam Sharpe Day was proclaimed, because of the pandemic, there is great interest and zeal being demonstrated as we seek to reinstate and reinvigorate our program for the celebration of our national hero, Right Excellent Samuel Sharpe. There's a well-known saying within the philosophy of Marcus Garvey that reminds us of the importance of knowledge in the creation of positive and committed citizenry. And I quote, and you all know it, a people without knowledge of their past, history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. There is also another well-known quote, this time from the Holy Bible, that describes a people of promise and achievement in God's kingdom as being, and I quote, like a tree planted by the rivers of water that bringeth forth its fruit in its season. His leaves shall not wither, and whatsoever he doeth shall prosper, unquote. When we put these two together, it seems to me that every effort to ensure that our people are knowledgeable in our past history and culture must be carefully staged, because out of it will come a positive and committed citizenry. It is for this reason that I'm so pleased that the Sam Sharpe Flames of Freedom Committee has included a lecture as part of the program so that information regarding the outstandingly significant national hero may be disseminated among our people. There are many persons who have stated that Sam Sharpe is among the least known and therefore least celebrated national hero, in contrast to the important role he played in the abolition of chattel slavery. Others bemoan a general lack of knowledge among our people regarding many aspects of our past history and culture, some linking that lack of knowledge to some of the social deficits within our country. Today, we have an opportunity to unearth from among the universe of oftentimes misinformation in relation to our history the truth regarding our ancestors. This is one of the reasons why we in the House of Parliament enacting a bill to absolve our freedom fighters from their description of criminals by the colonial people for fighting for our freedoms. This is only possible through the knowledge that we have about Paul Bogle, Taki, Sam Sharpe, and others. Let us not forget that Sam Sharpe was executed for his role in the Sam Sharpe War of 1831 as an insurrectionist and a criminal. This unique history that we celebrate as a people who have come through hundreds of years of enslavement and colonial oppression must include a constant deconstruction and reconstruction of our past. It's about filling in the gaps. It's about telling the story from the perspective of the lion and not of the hunter, from the perspective of the enslaved and not of the enslaver. There are so many gaps in information surrounding the activities carried out by Sam Sharpe and his followers prior to and after the 1831 war. For example, when we in modern Jamaica see the distance between Catadupa and Kensington, including the extent of the forestry, we must marvel at how a man could in those days traverse those hills at night as part of the meticulous planning of the first ever recorded strike in Jamaica. We must consider how it was that once the strike failed to move the planters to free the enslaved, industrial action moved swiftly into insurrection and war as the flames of freedom engulfed plantations across Westmoreland, Hanover, Trelawney, St. Anne, and St. Mary. These questions belie the many stories as told by the planters and beg for further and deeper research. And we give thanks to Mr. Shalman Scott for the work that he has done about Sam Sharpe. Because when we think of the strategic approaches to war and resistance, some of the stories we get cannot be true. In this regard, lectures like today provide an occasion for interrogation and dialogue as we, the children and grandchildren of these our ancestors, seek the truth about their work, their worth, and their substance in the triumph over slavery. As such, I point to the writings of Henry Bleby, missionary and first-hand witness, who made the following comment as he evaluated the impact of the Sam Sharpe War, which students know is sometimes called the Christmas Rebellion and also called the Baptist War. And I quote from Mr. Bleby, "That revolt failed by accomplishing the immediate purposes of the author, yet by it a further wound was dealt to slavery, which accelerated its destruction," unquote. The Sam Sharpe War caused the British Parliament to abolish slavery 2 years later, not just in Jamaica, but in the entire British Empire, thanks to the selfless sacrifice of our national hero and his band of warriors. And so I commend Minister Davis and his team for the staging of this lecture. It is my hope and expectation that those who are gathered here will leave here more mindful of the quality of leadership of our national hero and be inspired within our current challenges to recapture the concept of a shared vision and a shared destiny that was the root of the activities of Sam Sharpe as we confront our issues. It is indeed my own prayer that somewhere within our celebrations, including of the Sam Sharpe Day and beyond, we'll be able to reignite a nation for greatness as a result of the truth about ourselves that we unearth. I close with the words of Marcus Garvey, and I quote, "If we as a people realize the greatness from which we came, we will be less likely to disrespect ourselves," unquote. God bless the memory of Sam Sharpe. God bless Jamaica, land we love.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bartley. Thank you on behalf of, please express our profound thanks to Minister Grange for her message. I know her heart is here with us this afternoon. Now, ladies and gentlemen, one little bit of entertainment before we get into the main event. So at this time, I'm going to be inviting the Anchovy High School to come forward and do their thing. Anchovy High School, please come forward. They're outside? Oh. I didn't know I was going to get a souvenir from some Sharpe this evening. You know? But that was very well done. Give the Anchovy High School a round of applause, please. Thank you very much, Anchovy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, now to the meat of the matter. And the gentleman who will be guiding the other gentleman who will be speaking is none other than the governor. So please welcome Governor Lloyd B. Smith, who is our moderator.
Good evening, everyone. All the various distinguished persons at the head table have already been introduced, and so I will spare you another round of such introductions. We are here, after all, to get to the meat of the matter. As you would have seen on your program, we were supposed to be having two presenters, unfortunately, or maybe, who knows, fortunately, we only have Mr. Shalman Scott. Mr. Scott is no stranger, not just to Montego Bay, but to Jamaica. He's a political commentator, he's a historian, a former trade unionist, and I don't know how he has so much history in his headspace. He's like an encyclopedia when it comes to various historical data relating especially to Western Jamaica. And Shalman has been my good friend for many years. Indeed, from he was mayor. I think I had to rescue him once. But I know of his intellectual rigor, I know of his depths of knowledge, and I also know of his passion to impart what he knows and not just to keep it for himself. I really hope, Shalman, that one of these days you will seriously do some publishing in terms of the vast knowledge that you have. And so we all have been given our boarding passes, and we are about to be taken on a flight. I would perhaps advise you all to fasten your seatbelts, because it is likely to be a very hectic, turbulent flight, because this man doesn't mince his words. He speaks not only from his heart, but he speaks from the pedestal of truth, because in this age of misinformation, disinformation, and we could go on, sometimes the history, even of Sam Sharpe, has been distorted, embellished, and given various aspects that may not necessarily be true. Shalman Scott this evening brings us the truth. Let's welcome him.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am making sure I take off the mask. Gentlemen at the head table, I wish to recognize all of you, and I am going to say publicly that my friend, Mr. Homer Davis, who is Member of Parliament for one of our constituencies in St. James, and is now elevated to Minister of State in the Ministry of Culture. Officer of the Prime Minister. I just want to on behalf of all of us, to say that we are very proud of your achievement. And we wish you all the best in your undertakings. From the outset, when the Reverend Devon Dick had indicated his willingness to be here, then he would be focusing on the religious activities of Sam Sharpe, while I would pay attention to the secular side. I am glad that even although the Reverend Dick could not make it, then I am still able to do the side that the organizers wanted me to do. I'd like to say that Sam Sharpe, when he was in jail in the square, very often there is talk about the cage, and there is misunderstanding, because some people think that the cage was the jail. The cage was the entrance to a 500 square foot jail behind the cage. There was a torturing chamber, there was a whipping post, and there was a regular jail. A matter of fact, the Second Maroon War of 1795 in Upper St. James was as a result of 2 Maroons coming to Montego Bay and stole pigs and were arrested. And they were put in the jail. But not only that, they were finally found guilty and whipped. And the person who was given the whip to beat the Maroons, consistent with the First Maroon Peace Treaty of 1739, where the first order of business is that the Maroons are to capture runaway slaves, they themselves being former runaway slaves, and return them to the authority for a fee. And so, in the process of these Maroons being whipped, it was one of those runaway slaves that the Maroons had captured in the mountain and returned to the authority for a fee, who was given the whip to beat the Maroons. And the embarrassment that caused resulted in the Second Maroon War of 1795. And so we had that situation. That is where Sam Sharpe was in jail from the time he turned himself in until the time they hung him on May 23rd, 1832. That's where he was in jail. That's where he wrote a number of his letters from the prison stroke jail in the back of the entrance, which was just 10 square foot, really. So Sam Sharpe wrote one of his letters to the person in charge of the English Parliament. And in that letter, that is where I want to end what I'm going to be speaking with you about. But I'm also going to begin with it, because it has touched me personally, and quite understandably, it will touch many of us. In the letter he wrote to the British Parliament, in closing, he says, Sam Sharpe, who was once a slave, now national hero, spoke and demonstrated repeatedly that he preferred to die on his feet than to live on his knees. I prefer to die on my feet that are in circulation. He was supposed to have been born and grew up on Kensington Estate, Retrieve Plantation, that's near Cambridge, Azelimp Plantation, Croydon Plantation at Catadupa, and Cooper's Hill, which is above Jarrett Park, where he was born and where he grew up until eventually, as you will hear as I proceed, that he was sold by his master and so on and so forth. So one thing on which some chroniclers seem to agree is that he was an educated town slave. But since there was no specific period ever mentioned when and where he was a town slave, the situation has only left readers in a state of more confusion and bewilderment. The continued bending of the history as it relates to enslaved people, our ancestors, our descendants, had the rebellion listed as a Baptist war, and conclusively does not support such a claim. So what are the facts? Following Sharpe's instructions, preparation for the protest was combined with religious meetings. Large numbers of slaves met at 22 various established Christian churches, 11 Baptists out of the 22. So it was not a Baptist war, as it is often referred to. 3 Presbyterians, 3 Wesleyan Methodists, and 5 Moravians. And at an unknown number of Mayal Chapel or revival churches locations. They were all involved. An estimated 60,000 persons participated in the revolution led by His Excellency Sam Sharpe. Many of Sharpe's lieutenants were not Baptist. Many were Methodist Creole, mixed race, slaves who were headmen on estates. So they evacuated their property, leaving for Montego Bay early during the day of December 27, 1831, the Kensington people. By afternoon, the property was flooded with troops from the St. James Militia based at Barracks Road and 4th Street, and the uniformed groups began to use strong-arm tactics to force the slaves to begin preparation for the following day, December 28, to go back to work again without payment. By nightfall, and with news spreading of a disastrous Salters Hill church meeting earlier that day with Nib, where the slaves walked out on him, the tension and the atmosphere of confrontation had reached its peak. In response, the trash house was lit and triggered the eruption of numerous fires across western Jamaica, the unmistakable signal to begin the war they had spent months planning for. My research tells me that night, at the start of the 1831-32 Emancipation Rebellion, when Kensington torch of freedom was lit to signal the start of the final slave rebellion before emancipation, Palmyra to the east saluted with their fire. And when Falmouth saw Palmyra fire, they saluted. Fire, fire, fire. And so, before we know it, the destruction was a lot. And this destruction arising from the Sam Sharpe rebellion did something larger than even what was perceived by our ancestors. Because in less than 6 months of the Sam Sharpe rebellion, the English Parliament passed the law for the gradual abolition of slavery throughout the empire, not Jamaica, throughout the empire, as a consequence of the Sam Sharpe rebellion, as one of the significant factors that precipitated such a quick reaction from the authorities, the parliamentary, political, business, and military people in England. They all decided that based on the way things were going, it was time for them to bring an end to slavery throughout the empire, which they did by the passage of that law on the 29th of July, 1832, less than 6 months after the massive rebellion in Jamaica. In this rebellion, when it started, 900 great houses were in Jamaica. When it ended, only 15 remained, including Rosal Great House, that went into receivership from 1797 under John Palmer Sr., husband of Rosa Palmer, original owner of Rosal, and who also owned Brandon Hill Hotel, where Annie Palmer lived, never at Rosal. That's where she lived until her husband, John Palmer, died at the hotel above Montego Bay High School, and her family came in to help her, and they jumped up and purchased a place named Bonavista between Anchovy and Roehampton, and that is where Annie Palmer lived until she died and was buried on the 9th of July, 1846, in the parish churchyard up the road here. In the parish churchyard up the road here, in an unmarked grave. And the pastor who presided over Annie Palmer's funeral was the Reverend T. Garrett, who was in charge of the parish church. She never lived at Rosal. Rosal was in receivership. She never lived there. Neither she nor her husband, because not even the father-in-law could not have lived there, having owed so much money on the place. So these are some of the stories you are hearing about cave and how far Annie Palmer would walk and all the rest of it. These are just fabricated nonsense. She was buried on the 9th of July, 1846, in the St. James Parish Churchyard in an unmarked grave. The person who buried her was the pastor at the St. James Parish Church, the Reverend T. Garrett, Garrett. And this is where Annie Palmer continues to lie, while everybody is running with their US dollar going out there to get a peep if they can see her foot in the grave. But that's how life is. And we thank God that we have been able, through the determination of our ancestors, who took a decision not to what did Sharpe says? about that I rather to die on my feet than to live on my knees. Yes? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So it was a slave known as John Dunbar, Kensington. We're back at Kensington. The person who arranged for the trash house at Kensington Estate to be set afire and started the 1831-32 slave rebellion. He would not have been chosen for such a huge task to send the first fire signal across western Jamaica had he been a wishy-washy and flippant individual. So who was he professionally? Kensington Estate, like all other large estates, had its own slave hospital and armory. John Dunbar was the resident doctor, the medicine man, or the mayalist at that hospital. He was the man given the job to send the first fire signal. He was considered to be trustworthy and responsible enough that when time came for the spark to begin to flash, that it would be from Kensington, which is strategically located, which can be seen both from the west and from the east. And in the process, they knew what they were to do, and they did what they had to do. So Kensington Estate, like all other large estates, had its own slave hospital and armory, and John Dunbar was a resident doctor there. In other words, he was father or mother, or what does what the mothers do. So John Dunbar was resident doctor, medicine man, or mayalist at that hospital. Medicine men, along with the priest or bongo man of the convinced cult, were the healers among the slave society, and even some of the white society that would privately seek their assistance. Now, of course, it's the same way the game playing. I mean, some people are too better than others to go to see them, so they hide and do it. They hide and do it late nights. Yes, so Sam Sharpe and his lieutenants chose a man, John Dunbar, who was respected both in the white society and the slave society, a man of cool demeanor, and an ardent Christian at the Salters Hill Baptist Church. The plan was, if there were attempts by the authorities to force slaves to go to work again as slaves, then the rebellion should begin. There is an argument that when the warring company of black rebels had the upper hand and they converged at Long Hill, their failure to take over Montego Bay was due to the time they spent arguing among themselves as to who should be crowned king. This is outright rubbish and foolishness. The rebellion was about ending slavery. It was not to set up a Haiti-type government with what Bookman and Toussaint L'Ouverture was able to do there in 1791. So it is not some of these stories that have been told to us and written in these books and all the rest of it for so long. It's just a pack of nonsense. Secondly, if there was ever any thought about crowning a king in Montego Bay, why should the rebels be arguing about who would be king when their acknowledged leader, Sam Sharpe, was very much alive and well and leading the charge? So what are the facts? Because of the clash at Belvedere and Montpelier Estates, Colonel W.S. Grignon, that's the army man, the military, head of the St. James and Combined Interior Western Militia, was outmaneuvered by the Black Regiment of Sharpe's men, the slaves, who are not supposed to have much sense. Yes. Colonel Grignon withdrew the planters and their families, all headed to Montego Bay, and asked for help from the then Governor Lord Earl Belmore, who by that time had declared martial law. 2 British warships joined one already in the Montego Bay harbor, bringing the number to 3, with all guns pointing and flooding the town at nights with lights. The rebels, on reaching Long Hill, had a clear view of what was happening in the harbor. They were receiving intelligence by way of bush telegram, and decided that, because they don't have no cell phone, decided that they could not, with few guns, match the firepower of 3 British man-of-wars in the Montego Bay harbor. Any attempt to confront the 3 British man-of-wars with cannons and thousands of soldiers, consisting of artillerymen with field guns, with mortars and rocket launchers, would be suicidal. So they have to change strategy. In any case, both Captain Charles Williams of the HMS Sparrowhawk, Her Majesty's ship, HMS Sparrowhawk, Her Majesty's ship, the Queen's ship, and because the royal family were the main owners of the slave ships, you know that. Yes. Well, we can't cover everything one night. In any case, both Captain Charles Williams of the HMS Sparrowhawk and General Willoughby Cotton, commander of the British forces in Jamaica, and the HMS Racehorse, which was his ship, concurred in their report that the plan of the rebels was to burn down Montego Bay and therefore not to crown a king. At this point in the conflict, the rebels changed strategy and began to focus on the destruction of physical infrastructure, the very foundation of the plantocratic slavery, the great houses, the wharves. Is we know nonsense? Yeah. We are supposed to know nonsense. Water canals and factories. 100 wharves were destroyed around the country, according to the governor in his report to the Secretary of the Colonies in England. Within 10 days, the Sam Sharpe War was over, but its impact was monumental. It had the effect of countering the rumor by the West India lobby, which is the planters' propaganda machinery, comprised of absentee landowners and powerful London merchants, including slave ship owners, who claimed that slaves in Jamaica did not want slavery to be abolished, as they would be very unhappy if they were not owned by anyone. The rebellion also strengthened the hands of the members of the anti-slavery society to whip up more public opinion against slavery. A sectarian war of sorts emerged between the established Anglican Church and the nonconformist churches, marking the second but different phase of the hostility. The Anglicans, the Church of the Planters, accused the leadership of the nonconformist churches of influencing the slaves to rebel. A national organization called the Colonial Church Union, CCU, an equivalent of the Ku Klux Klan in Jamaica, was created by the planters. and the merchants and the military, was formed in the parish of St. Anne, with chapters all over Jamaica, except Kingston, where the free blacks and colored would not allow it to take root. The leader was the Reverend A.W. Bridges. A.W. Bridges, the rector for the St. Anne Bay Anglican Church, the pastor, was now leading the military arm against people fighting for their right to freedom. The organization comprised of planters, priests, members of the militia, and French royalist whites who escaped from the Toussaint Bookman Haitian Revolution by settling in Jamaica. Of course, you remember the blacks took over Haiti. Toussaint Louverture and his military strategist, who was a Jamaican named Bookman. The Colonial Church Union Manifesto read in part, the vermins, referring to the pastors of the nonconformist churches, wanted to reduce property to dust and secure for themselves advantages that will accumulate wealth and power. But it was the intention of the Colonial Church Union, which is the equivalent of the Ku Klux Klan here at the time, to wipe the nonconformist preachers off the face of the earth. End of quote. Burning and breaking down of nonconformist churches went apace, and the slaves were shot on sight by the pastors and planters of the Colonial Church Union. Several Anglican churches were closed for worship. This included the Mandeville Parish Church, as the Anglican church buildings were turned into military barracks and jails. The Lima massacre in St. James. Lima is right outside of Delphi, on your way to Hamden Estate and onto Wakefield Main Road. The Lima massacre, in which 200 defenseless enslaved Africans, men, women, and children, were rounded up and shot in cold blood in the square just outside Adelphi in St. James, is a major blot in our history. The Adelphi Anglican Church was the staging ground from which the 200 enslaved persons were massacred by the white planters in Lima Square, St. James. During the slave rebellion, Adelphi Anglican Church was transformed into a military barracks, torturing chamber, whipping post, and a jail to fight the slaves in that area. And this is going to surprise you. William Knibb was present at the Adelphi Anglican Church when the massacre of the 200 Negro slaves took place, the biggest mass murder in the history of Jamaica, both under the colonial powers of Spain and England. This must not be forgotten and deserves the erection of a memorial to the sacrifice of our ancestors and the insensitivity of the white planters to slaves as humans. The Lima mass murder was sanitized and recorded in the historical archives in Spanish Town by Clinton Black, who was the archivist, as the infamy at Lima. Just an infamous act at a place named Lima, which could be considered to be Lima, Peru, because it's spelled the same way, and that was the whole intention. You dodge it off, You don't write it, you're Clinton Black, you're writing textbook for our education system. But that is not important to be in there. In the history of Jamaica, that 200 of our people were rounded up and shot down by the Colonial Church Union, an equivalent of the Ku Klux Klan in Jamaica, operated by the planters and the military people and those of such interest. Yes? It was a slave-inspired and directed war, the biggest in terms of groupings, participation, and of geographical spread in terms of absolute numbers since the 1673 slave rebellion in St. Anne. That's where the Reverend Bridges come in there. This is an excerpt from the letter. I'm fast forwarding. From the letter Sam Sharpe wrote from jail behind the cage to the British Parliament and asking his mistress, Mrs. Sharpe, to publish it, or between Reverend Bleby and Mrs. Sharpe to deliver that letter to the people it is intended for. And here are the words that he wrote. Quote, the beast of the earth, the asses, the cows, the pigs do not receive the harshness of treatment that we do. Even though we are all the property of the landowner, the animals in the pens are treated with more respect. Their heads are not cut from their bodies and hung upon poles. They are not flogged until they bleed. Buckets of salt are not thrown on their open wounds. They are not bound in chains and placed in stocks. To hold another in chain is against the laws of God. I learned from my Bible that the whites had no more rights to hold black people in slavery than the blacks had to make white people slaves. And for my own part, I rather die than live in slavery. End of quote. The choice of place for the hanging in the Albert Market of the Right Excellent Samuel Sharpe, national hero, and the manner of his burial by sea has powerful symbolism. It was not by accident that they just take him and just throw him nearby the sea. There were certain people who were operating. And they had certain beliefs about when you are buried so close to the sea and the tide ebbs and flows, the disturbance that it can bring to your spirit. But I can't go further. But if we can come to an acceptance that the history should not be viewed in a straight line from one date to the next, but ought to be seen as a network of interlocking dynamics coming together and impacting on one another, and that by paying patient, consistent, and forensic attention, following leads by ferreting and cross-checking information is the only way to get to the facts and the truth of the matter. On May 23rd, 1832, a proud and defiant Sam Sharpe was publicly hanged in Montego Bay Square. That now bears his name, fulfilling words he uttered, I would rather die on yonder gallows than to live one more day of slavery, end of quote. He had accepted death on the scaffold as a freedom from the unbearable, repugnant miseries of slavery, and as the only means by which freedom was attainable. Sam Sharpe, once a slave, now national hero, spoke and demonstrated that he preferred to die on his feet than to live on his knees. I thank you.
And I ask you to remain standing. I ask you to remain standing just for, sir. Hello. Hello. Okay. I am asking that we observe 1 minute of silence in the memory of Sam Sharpe, a man who preferred to die on yonder glass than to remain in slavery. Long live Samuel Sharpe. Shalman Scott has given us so much food for thought. What a revelation. He has opened our eyes to the truth. And I dare say that he, meaning Samuel Sharpe, has not been given enough national recognition, because it was his advocacy, his death, that triggered in the very final analysis the abolition of slavery. And there's no question about that. Not William Knibb, not all the other so-called, what we call them again, Dr. Prendergast, abolitionists. Not them. It was the blood of all those persons who were killed, including the 200 at Lima or Lima, whatever we call it. Lima. Well, in Peru it is Lima, the Spanish pronunciation, Lima. And Mr. Mayor, we have to find a way to establish a monument, Mr. Minister, for those 200 souls at Lima. You are invited. There's a microphone at the center there. Just for a few minutes, I'm sure some of you may want to ask Mr. Scott any question, or if you want to make your own, or make a comment, but brief. We don't want you to make a speech. Anyone who wants to come forward? There's a mic in the middle there. Shalman.
Yes. There's something I am going to mention, and it has to do with the Burchell Baptist Church on Market Street and on King Street. During the Sam Sharpe Rebellion, or before the rebellion, Burchell, the Reverend Burchell, who was in charge of that Baptist church, left the Baptist church in the hands of Sam Sharpe, who was a deacon at that church, and went back to England with his family. He owned a place in where is it? Just down the road there, where the whole steamer wharf is. Where you call down there? Sandy Bay. Sandy Bay, Hopewell. Sandy Bay. He owned Sandy Bay, Burchell. Several acres of land. That's what these pastors, many of them were coming out of the metropole to do, to help themselves. So all of them owned places there. There was a Sir Martin Peto. The man, Sir Martin Peto, was head of the British Baptist Missionary Society in the world. He gave Burchell £3,000 to buy land here for him. So he bought land in Hanover, close to Burchell, and named it Mount Peto. Mount Peto. He never came here, didn't know his land. It was Burchell who was handling his business here. And when the time came, Burchell sold out his property and leave. And also sold Martin Peter property. But William Knibb owned Granville in Trelawney, 79 acres of land. He owned Granville. And during the whole lot of excitement, William Knibb sold his 79 acres of land in Granville that he raised racehorses on, essentially. Sold it to the London Land Bank. Then he left here and went over to England for a while, made a few speeches, and came back here. And the congregation in Falmouth was so happy to have him back that they decided. And then he told them that he had given the land in Granville for the purpose of their resettlement when emancipation came. So they had a whole lot of lands up in Duncan's. So the church owned those lands. So they gave him, because of his generosity to them, they gave him several acres of free land in Duncan's. One of the things that Knibb did was to change the name to where he was born in England. I'm trying to remember the name. I just had it in my head and it slipped me. But it will come back. But, Kettering. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Kettering. Kettering. I don't know it, but I can spell it. Right. Now, but serious business. The dishonesty in Knibb. He sold his land. Not only that, after they insulted him at the Salters Hill Baptist Church on the night of the 27th, he went back to Falmouth and gave the Baptist Church to the military to be used as a torturing chamber and a whipping post to fight the slaves. And then when the military was leaving, they break down the Falmouth Baptist Church. Because then that suited Knibb, because Knibb did not build any church here. It was Moses Baker, a black missionary from America, who was sent by George Lyle to Western Jamaica, that built the Falmouth Baptist Church, and William Knibb was the 6th pastor for the Falmouth Baptist Church when he arrived there. The 6th pastor. He did not build any church there. And then he arranged during the war for the church to be broken down so he could get a play in the game now to build it back. The first thing we need to do is to be responsible and provide good quality information for our people and to show respect to our people. The people who tear down the Bethel Baptist Church on the 8th of February, 1832, is the Kensington people whose property was burnt down, who led the military. The military man, Sir W. Charles, what's the last name? Morris. Morris were the owners at Kensington. And I have a list of the people who destroyed the Baptist church. I have it in my file. And there were 2 Morrises on the list from Kensington Estate. So in the process of them going on as if they were just fighting slaves, it was their pecuniary interest that they were finding a way to take revenge for. But all of that, we would not know. All we need to know is that, it was a Baptist war. It was not a Baptist war. And I am sorry that Reverend, what's his name, was supposed to come? Huh? Reverend Devon Dick. And he's married to my cousin, so I'm not giving him too much of a hard time. But Reverend Dick, I wanted him to come here, because he has written quite a bit of that kind of thing about Baptist this and Baptist that, and the Baptists in the war and all the rest of it. The war was our people, some of them belonging to many of them were revivalists. They never went into any of the formal Christian churches. But they know what they were about, because if either their parents, their parents would have been accustomed to freedom before they were captured as slaves and brought here on these ships and put to work in any. My brother, let me stop. You come. Let me hear what. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I stuck in second here. I got in my seat that I'm ready for the journey, but I started confused right now. You mentioned something earlier that Annie Palmer never lived
at Rose Hall. Never lived at Rose Hall. She lived at, I told you where she lived, Brandon Hill Hotel, until the husband died. John Palmer Jr. died at Brandon Hill Hotel. They married 1820 and John Palmer died 1827. And after that they had to leave. She had to leave Brandon Hill. What was the significance of Brandon Hill? Rosa Palmer, the matriarch of Rose Hall, owned, that was her townhouse. So she have the country house out at Rose Hall, and she has the townhouse, which was Brandon Hill Hotel above Montego Bay High School. That's where Annie Palmer lived until the husband died. And her family, listen, Annie Palmer was born in Hanover at a place named Bark. Annie Palmer, mother and father died, and she came to live with her grandparents at a place named Kew in Hanover. She eventually came up here, got married to John Palmer, and John Palmer lived for 7.5 years and died. And Annie Palmer, family members gathered around her and purchased a place named Bonavista between Anchovy and Roehampton. And that's where Annie Palmer lived until she died.
Mr. Scott, I believe you, but guess what? This is hard to digest.
I know.
Listen,
Well,
you're supposed to go to school with Dr. Bird's book.
all you have to do is chew it. Just chew it a little longer. And Daika is good. Daika. Well, I'm glad I came here. I really am enjoying myself. My sister, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Now, as an educator, I'm not sure if I'm confused.
You're not sure.
I'm not sure. Because we have been educated based on what we
Yes. All of us.
been taught. And history is important. And authentic information is also important. So, how do you propose that we make the amends at this point?
It's not, listen, we are living in the information age. And things that normally they kept away from us, all we need is to touch a button.
But it is our education system. He spoke about the Dr. Bird series, that series was written.
The Who series?
Was written for
No, sorry, I didn't get the series.
for our Jamaican primary school students.
Yes.
So, where did that information come from? Who checked that information? Why would that have been given to us? Because that's something, that information is something that was given to us, and we passed it on.
A lot of power plays involved. There are powerful people who have benefited financially from the lies and propaganda and foolishness that we have been fed with. And they are there protecting their interests to make it remain.
So, Mr. Scott, how do you propose that as educators we move forward? Because now I sat there and I am like, oh my
God. Right. So the first thing you have to do is to jump up and give Scott his fear to fly out of the island. And then I will ball out a few things and then leave.
Go right ahead, go right ahead.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, my brother.
Mr. Scott, I am really would agree with the rest of educators who spoke a while ago. But one of the things that I would love to hear is that someone like Mr. Sid Bartlett, if he could really come and really agree with all of the aspects that you have said, because Mr. Sid Bartlett is one of those historians.
There you didn't hear him while I was talking.
Well,
a matter of fact,
some of the points,
he was so happy.
Yeah. But it would be good if he really comes and really say, yes, this is exactly what he thinks. I would love to hear.
All right, let me hear from Rasta Block.
Greetings in the name of the Most High.
Greetings, brother.
Hi. I'm from Kensington.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, I just read you're a Rasta Block, that's you.
Yeah, man.
But you're brown.
I mean, greetings to my Conwayans. Bless up as a whole boy.
Russ, go ahead, Russ.
All right. We have a young historian in Kensington right now. He speaks at Tulloch Castle more time when they have the things down there.
Yes.
He informed I that my great-great-great-grandmother was a house slave.
Yes.
And while the fire was burning, she ran out with a young great-great-great-grandmother. So it seems like I come from the same place and I still live there. Right now, we're developing a chips factory to be named Daddy Sharpe Banana Chips. See, so Kensington is on top of the world. Blessed.
All right. We won't charge you for that advertisement, but but thanks, and we hope, we know what it means. There is a beauty about where investment goes into areas that they don't normally go to. There's so much help that come to people and the transformation in their lives as a consequence of whatever might be the industrial activity. So keep doing what you're doing and let me know. Because I won't be able to give you any money, but I'll pray that you do well. Yes, my sister.
Good evening, everyone, member of the panel. And I'm going to say thank you for this lecture because we've been led with a lot of firm information. After Samuel Sharpe was taken from the square that he was on, we've got to understand that he went to Dump Up, that is now Harmony Beach.
That he went to where?
Dump Up, that is now Harmony Beach. And he's now, the remain is now lying under birch, under the...
No, because they had exhumed the bones from down at the beach. It's a fisherman's beach right down the road there that they buried him close to the sea.
Yes.
And there was a reason why they buried him close to the sea.
And now
it's a metaphysical reason, may I say.
Yeah.
And I can't go into it.
And now he's laying under the pulpit at Birchell. Can you...
Yes, because they buried him there and they went and exhumed the body and buried it under the pulpit at Birchell.
Okay, we want the younger ones to understand the truth. And
yes, well, when this discussion, the number of us who are here will be able to explain that.
Yeah.
There were two burials for Sam Sharpe. One by the sea and was basically out of revenge and vexation. Because you see, you will discover as you continue to pay attention to these matters, especially psychoanalytic matters, that there are some people who believe that when you're buried close to the sea and the tide ebbs and flows, then it will also disturb your spirit. Don't draw my tongue any further, please. Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Davis.
You have anything else to say?
No, I'm a Baptist.
When we will meet and talk. You, Miss, Croswell is still here? Mr. Taylor, the former principal, he has left? Oh, okay.
Do I have permission to just make one comment?
Oh, yes, please.
But this is not in support of Sid Bartlett's statement, so I just want...
I don't hear you.
This is not in support of Sid coming and saying yay or no.
No.
This is more a call for more of these lectures. That's one. But also, more because it would give us an opportunity to get beyond just the lectures as being presented. I mean, you have presented a perspective that has in somewhat discombobulated people's mindset, history, all of that. But what it does is that it reinforces the significance of placing history in geography. Because a lot of what you're talking about
give
tonight
integrity to the history.
Yes. And I dare say the relativity of truth.
Yes.
So what I'm calling for is one more of these so that we can engage in literally interrogating the statements that are being made. I don't want to take away anything from the lecture because it was brilliant. I don't want to take away anything from the evening because it has been a brilliant evening.
Yes.
What I'm getting to is just a call for more of these kinds of engagement.
Oh, yes.
So that we can lift the intellectual discourse within the city space.
Very good. Very good.
The second thing I will say is that I am personally happy that you have reinforced something that all the people up there would have heard me say. We need to talk about the city of Montego Bay as the city of Montego Bay, and not put any other kind of label on it, whether it's first, second, third, or fourth, but the city of Montego Bay. Because until we do that, we will never truly appreciate the value of a Sam Sharpe and the values that came out of that particular period in Jamaica's history and the history of our emancipation movement and all of that. The value of resilience, the value of empowerment, the value of emancipating ourselves, the value of standing on our feet instead of living on our knees.
Hallelujah. To the Lamb of God.
All right, just one more, and that's it. You're going to, go ahead, sir.
It looks like it's too.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to be the one to close it. I wanted to come and be on the same line with my colleague here, that not just having the lecture, but how do we now ensure
continuity.
The continuity of it, but how do we now ensure that the generation that we have, like my fellow colleagues in the classrooms, it is important that students know, or students have this information that you have. Like so many other persons, I had the belief that Annie Palmer was wherever they say she was. Now, we have to also be careful, because we don't want the white people to come and sue us for wrong information and making them pay if you go see Annie. How do we make sure that this information that you have that is so relevant to the city of Montego Bay, pass on to the students?
I'm glad you asked that question.
Just to let you go, those kind of lectures would also be more meaningful if it was to happen around school time, where teachers would be able to bring students into our settings like that. It's hard to get the students out during that festive time right now. But if it happens sometime in October during the Heroes celebration, then we could have students here fill this room to get that information.
Good. Thanks very much for those comments. Yes, we're wrapping up. What happened is that when Sam Sharpe was to be made national hero, there was not, this so-called archives here did not have sufficient information on the Sam Sharpe rebellion, generally the activities, and also on Sam Sharpe personally. Professor Camus Brathwaite and Minister Arnold Bertram have to, Mr. Manley has to ask them to go to England to go and do the research at the Public Records Office and all the various institutions that are available from which historical information can receive. That's what has to happen. With all the William Nib and all this one writing and the other one writing, it did not amount to anything much. The real information that we now have about these people have come out of a trip to England. I had an experience, and perhaps maybe another time I will share it. But I was in England. I was in England studying, 4,602 miles away from my home. When I came, I had about 4 assignments to do. I did about 3 and decided to take a break. I'm at the British Museum, huge place. And when I took the break, I looked at the corner of the desk at which I sat, and there were 3 books that someone left there. And the middle one was entitled In Old St. James. It was written by Joseph Shore. The Shores were the owner of Lilliput slave plantation. Joseph Shore wrote the book and, of course, published it in a market where he can make more money. Because that's part of the thing, you know, the economics of it. When I opened the book, it is, I am from Barrytown, which adjoins Success and Lilliput. And I am seeing this thing for the first time. With all of this information, well, it's not the first time I was seeing. Part of it, my grandmother told me a lot of these stories. So I wasn't seeing it for the first time. I was seeing it in print for the first time. Joseph Shore wrote about the story about Lilliput. Out at Greenwood, where you have the Greenwood Great House, above there was the Greenwood Sugar Factory and Slave Plantation. Our people blow up the sugar boiler there and 13 people were killed and closed down the Barrytown Greenwood Sugar Factory forever and move off the estate to come and squat on the back of Lilliput, which is owned by Shore, who wrote that book that I am now seeing 4,602 miles away from home. I was just guided to that desk and saw all that he wrote there. So we are known in Barrytown. Barrytown people are Barrytown people. And we are known as the bus boiler race because we blow up the sugar factory boiler during the Sam Sharpe rebellion and close it down forever. And I could go on. But don't get me started tonight. Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
We need to write our own history and not to rely on the oppressors. Thank you so much, Shalman. Another round of applause for the man of the moment. Like you, I have been informed, a little entertainment as well. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I'm leaving here feeling very empowered because I am now fully satisfied that we as a people have a great history and that we were not just slaves, as oftentimes we are being told, but that we were also emancipators. We are the true emancipators. Yes. Thank you, Minister Homer Davis. You have done a wonderful job by bringing this lecture here. And sir, I'm asking you to take up the advice. If you need my help, let me know. That in October of next year, we're going to have Sam Sharpe lecture number 2. In order to accommodate the students and educators at that time. And we'll work with you, for sure. Thanks to the other persons on the platform, His Worship the Mayor, the Custos, Honorable Conrad Pitkin, and of course, Sid Bartley, who represented, I almost said Her Majesty, the Queen. thank you all for coming. And even as you celebrate this Christmas 2022, remember the Christmas rebellion of 1832, Shalman? 1831, 32. Long live Samuel Sharpe. Have a good evening. Get home safely, eh?
All right, thank you, Mr. Smith. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. But before we go, how could we not say thanks to Mr. Scott for being here? So at this time, I'm going to be inviting the Honorable Minister to make a presentation to Mr. Scott. And Mr. Scott, you know, I was standing there, I said, I'd love to hear you in Parliament. You probably would have spoken up at Parliament for 2 days consecutively. Thank you so much, sir. And who better could have guided us this evening through the paces of this lecture than the governor? So I'm going to ask Minister to make a presentation to Governor Lloyd B. Smith. All right, thank you very much, and thank you again for being here, ladies and gentlemen. As Mr. Smith says, try and get home safely. God bless you. Oh, and we will see each other again on the 28th when we have the Flames of Freedom Torch Run and that grand celebration up in Kensington. All right?